Hello, welcome to the show. Thank you for tuning in. That's Matt behind the camera. We've got our CCO, Chief Conspiracy Officer Jason, with us here today. Agent Scully is somewhere at large in the city. I'm Ben. That means this is stuff they don't want you to know. Today, we're very excited to bring to you guys a collaboration with our friends over at All Time Conspiracies. We're putting out videos about the same subject this week. So what we wanted to do to prep you for our upcoming video later this week is to give you this update with a big question about ISIS that people don't often ask, which is, where did they get all this money? Looting. Now, this one seems pretty obvious, I think. When ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call it, when any invading force successfully conquers a city, a village, a town, or even a country, then the first thing they do is to begin looting. Not just businesses, not just government agencies, but of course, people's homes, people's property. And that was one of the initial propellants for ISIS. Energy assets. Now, of course, as ISIS has spread throughout the Middle East, it's getting access to one of the things that the Middle East is most known for. You're absolutely right, fossil fuels, oil, and they're successfully selling this oil. The first question for this would be, well, how are they doing that, right? Usually when we think of somebody selling oil, it's a country selling oil via a company, right? Or having an agreement with a large corporation. But from what we understand, in the Middle East, ISIS is selling oil to local traders who are then smuggling it across a border into Turkey, for instance, where it sells for less than the market price of non-stolen oil, which I guess is the best way to put it. Which makes you wonder, does that have anything to do with the plummeting price of oil? Angel investors. Since the West at large learned about ISIS, rumors have been persisting that Saudi Arabia or members of the former Saddam Hussein regime, now based in Kuwait, are involved with financing this group. As a matter of fact, this is not some sort of dodgy rumor. This is stuff that people who work for foreign ministries in places like Syria are saying publicly. Bank robberies. That's right. According to official sources, one of the big contributors to ISIS funds was a massive bank robbery at the Bank of Mosul. However, you'll notice that I said official sources, because when Matt and I started investigating this originally, we found that there were also statements from people associated with the Bank of Mosul, people associated with the government, who were saying that this robbery never occurred. Taxes. Yeah, I know, it sounds weird, but ISIS is doing something that a lot of other governments or would-be governments do, and that's a tax system. Now, this is not exactly like the tax system you're familiar with in a Western government so much as it's something we would recognize as extortion. This system of taxation is in some ways kind of arbitrary. People are paying protection money. They're getting stopped at toll roads that appear and disappear. There are imports being taken. There are amounts of property being taken, but this is different from a system of looting in that this is organized and there are set amounts that people are required to pay. So this is just a quick rundown of the ways in which ISIS is gathering funding to continue feeding its expansion across the Middle East. However, depending on who you're talking to, there's a lot more to the official story. There's an entire iceberg floating under the surface of the ISIS narrative. And these questions would be things like, is there an intelligence agency involved with or supporting ISIS in some way? How is ISIS related to the other terrorist faction groups that we're hearing about more often, less often in the news? And third, what do you think is the future of ISIS in the Middle East? Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for our upcoming video on not just ISIS, but religious extremism. And be sure to check out our friends at All Time Conspiracies this week. We've got a video of theirs that should be showing up somewhere on here, right, Matt?
Just 10 years after the Cold War and the threat of communism were put to bed, the US was the victim of an al-Qaeda terrorist attack, now known as 9/11. But rather than attributing the attacks to the specific group al-Qaeda, the government and media declared the enemy's name as Radical Islam. With little understanding of how Islam and Radical Islam are different from each other, America finds itself once again at war with an abstract ideology.